Hey, it's Jeremy from Jeremy.net. I am a comic book artist, writer, creator, self-publisher, and I share my creative process here with you online. If you enjoy these live streams, would like to get additional bonus live streams twice a month, you can become a Patreon subscriber for as little as $2 a month. Head on over to patreon.com/Jeremy. It's patreon.com/GERIMI. If you would like to get a free digital sketchbook, work in progress animated gifts delivered right to your inbox, blog posts about what I'm reading, what I'm watching, which inspiring me creatively, you can sign up for my free monthly newsletter at newsletter.jeremy.net. And if you'd like to purchase physical copies of my comic books, or if you read digitally on Kindle, you can go to amazon.jeremy.net. You will find my Amazon author page there. We'll forward you to my Amazon author page, and you can pick up my books there online. All right. So today, and there are links for all these in the description of the video. So let's see. I see James in the chat. Thanks for dropping in. He said great titles. Thank you. I greatly appreciate it. I'm glad you enjoyed them. I appreciate the support. So we're doing something a little bit different today, and the only reason why I can tell you why is because I'm just in the mood for doing something different. Film studies. I haven't been doing film studies in a while, and I started taking a schoolism class on key art, and one of the things that they recommended in there are doing film studies. So I'm going to bring up the current page that I have, and on my screen, this is showing up weird. I'm just getting a big black square. So please let me know if you guys can see the black and white photo with my sketch of it next to it. So just, let me know in the comments if that's showing up. And if so, then we're all good to go, and I'll just carry on, because I've had this problem before in the past, and it just happens. So, all right. Hey, James says he can see it, and Amar is in the chat. Hey, Amar, how you doing? Good to see you. Happy Sunday. All right, guys. So we can see the artwork here. And if for any point I'm drawing and there's not something there, and you guys are like, what's he talking about? What's going on? Just let me know. Anyway, the point of these studies they're not draftsmanship. I'm not trying to do a photo study where I'm trying to, get an accurate depiction of the facial expressions. It's more about studying composition and value. So, and also, these are broken down just into black and white and gray. So it's forcing me to minimize the values that I'm looking at, to really just focus. And this particular image that I'm drawing from is from the Alfred Hitchcock film Notorious. Or at least I'm pretty sure it's from Notorious. I know I grabbed an Alfred Hitchcock film, and I don't think it was Dial M for Murder. I'm pretty sure it was Notorious. So as opposed to continuing, because this one is pretty much done. So I pulled a couple others. And that's a little bit of a reason why I got started late. So I pulled a few other films to look at, and we're going to pick one and study from there. Let's see here. Amar says, I started an Ong Bak study last year. Need to get back to it. You know what? I have not seen that movie, but I hear it's an awesome martial arts film. So it's on my list of things to check out. I should definitely, I should check that out just to see it. But I look forward to seeing your film study of it. I see Worldbender is in the chat. Hello. I think you're a new viewer because I didn't recognize the name, but welcome. Please subscribe. I hope you enjoy these videos. Let me know, are you a creative, a film fan, a story fan, just hanging out? Fellow comic creator. I'm always curious to hear what brings people to the channel. But welcome. Nice. Happy to have you. See here. James is like, right. Composition. And Amar says mine was for animation and environmental reference. Yes, that's true. I mean, film studies, animation is a great thing to do film studies for, because you're studying how things move in film or in photography, or just generally getting a sense of how an object is going to take up space within the context of whatever story you're telling. If you're telling a story in animation, it's getting a sense of how that thing is going to fill up the story frame and how objects, characters, vehicles, whatever are going to move through that space. So let's see here. I grabbed a couple of film stills, and sadly, these are all movies that I have not seen but want to see. So this film still right here is from Sunset Boulevard. You know what? I'm going to take all of these and make them a little bit larger. So, yeah, this is from the Billy Wilder film, Sunset Boulevard, which has been on my list to see for quite a long time. And I just have not made time for it and need to do so. I don't know if we'll get a chance to do others, but I also grabbed like 3 different shots from Sunset Boulevard that were really good. So what that really tells me is I need to look at more Billy Wilder films. But I also grabbed another Hitchcock film called The Lodger. There's a creepy looking shot from there that I grabbed. And then, the Todd Browning film, Freaks, which is another one on my list. I've heard about it for years, since I was in college. Never got around to seeing it. So I will definitely have to put that on the list. Let's see here. See HJ in the chat. Welcome. How you doing? Thanks for popping in. Will Bender says, hopefully a future comic artist. You know what? I'm glad you're starting. At whatever age you're starting, just start making stuff. Because I will tell you that the best advice I was ever given when I was in college was that if I wait until I'm as good as I want to be to make something, I will never make anything. Because there's always more to learn. We're always getting better. And we're always dissatisfied with where our skills or storytelling skills or drawing skills, we're always dissatisfied with where they're at. But the way to get better is to make stuff. So if you want to make comics, just start making short, 4, 5-page, 8-page stories, maybe reinterpreting an existing classic story, or, just making up your own stories, but just doing the pages and putting them out there. That's the absolute best way to learn. So good luck to you. And hopefully you'll find things in my channel and my videos that are helpful to you. HJ says, I'm starting a film studies class in September. That's awesome. I mean, I remember I only took one film study class in college, but it was a survey on horror films and cinema. And it was, oddly enough, it was great, and I really, really enjoyed it. You would think that you would not fall asleep in a horror film class, but you put any college-age kid in a dark room at 11 a.m. or at 10 in the morning, and they're going to fall asleep. I actually fell asleep during Texas Chainsaw Massacre, the original. It's kind of crazy. But I saw a lot of films I'd never seen before, learned a lot. It was very interesting. Let's see here. And James says, some noirs. Yes, I intentionally picked black and white films because I'm studying value. I will freely admit that color is not my strong suit. And particularly, I have a hard time with keeping color, with clearly separating color and value. Meaning, like, when I'm looking at color images, it's harder for me to get my values correctly. So I figured, let me just start with black and white, work until my sense of values is just rock solid. And, I can do color, but it just takes me longer. Let's see. And I guess James says, yeah, Freaks is great. So I will definitely have to check that out. And also encouraging World Bender as well. Just do it. Lots of great feedback and encouragement. So that's what I love. Everybody just kind of shows up. We cheer each other on, hang out, talk shop, talk art. You guys are awesome. All right. Let's see here. I am going to start by filling. What I usually do to make sure that the proportions are the same is that I will duplicate the image I'm going to do. And then I will just fill that image with gray, with a 50% gray. And then I will alpha lock it so that, I know you guys can't see my hand, but if I draw, I'm scribbling all the way beyond it, but it'll stop the scribbles at the borders of the filled object. It's only painting on what is already filled in. So, I'm just moving the frame here so that I can kind of get a sense of what you're seeing. Because I tend to zoom in and zoom out. So I'm going to start here with just simply blocking in the major. Well, really what I should do is start with the horizon line. That's kind of the best thing when you're doing when you're starting with composition, is just lightly locking in that horizon, and then sort of dividing this into major areas. So I'm looking at the ground that the butler is standing on. So kind of like where those hedges in the background start, all the way to sort of like the floor plane of those arches. And blocking that over to the first vertical that it hits, and it's a slanted vertical, but basically where, actually, you know what? It's kind of silly. If I just look at where that, if I look at the three arches here, if I just look at where the second of the three arches hit, that gives me like a good visual container. And that is something kind of in the same way that I try to look at where anatomy lines up. Looking, instead of dealing with like human anatomy, like where does this elbow line up in terms of the torso? You know, where does the knee line up if it's, you know, going in a certain direction, or how far in or out it is, or whether it's reaching across the form. Instead of looking at that, looking at things that I can say, all right, I can use this as a box by which to measure all of the other things. So I can kind of put a little box in here saying, all right, those are all the arches. And I know that within this arch, you've got her hand is kind of coming across, but her face is kind of contained in that. Yeah, the arches make a good compositional. I mean, that my eye was drawn to this shot, and that's part of the point of doing film studies, is looking at what your eye is drawn to. When you're looking at the master work of a director like Billy Wilder, you can see like he lays out strong compositions for you. Let's see here. So Amar says the original Freaks was banned in certain places. These did let's see, they also did two remakes of it, one with Robert Englund and another with the same name. Yeah, I did know that the original was banned. I don't remember when it was unbanned, but the first time I ever even heard about it was when I was in college, having instructors talk about it. And I think it was one of those movies where I thought it was going to be something that was really just a disturbing horror film. But instead, I'm looking at it, and it reminds me really of just the Guillermo del Toro film, Nightmare Alley, which I am aware is also a remake. But that whole, you know, dealing with circus carnival folk, but it really being a story about humanity and about how a lot of times the people that we may think of as monsters are very human, and the people that we think are very human are wearing human faces, but they're really the monsters, which I think are very, very interesting. Let's see. James says, I've been going back to sketches and adding some details and adding forms, kind of Beksinski would do when he would start working on a piece and take away some and take some away time from it. I'm not sure if I'll always have the elements linking together, but I can see what works and what doesn't. Pardon me. I had a little bit of a frog in my throat. Yeah, I mean, I honestly wish that we always had the time to just step away from pieces. I mean, it's, you know, we decide how much time we do or don't want to give ourselves, but having the opportunity to step away from a piece can always, I mean, I look at it always as a benefit when you can, you know, go away, come back, get a sense of what is and isn't working. Time is the great editor. I did not make that up. I cannot remember who said that. It was either Gertrude Stein or Hemingway. I mean, it wasn't necessarily one of those two. It might have been somebody completely different. But that's who I think it was from last time I heard. But yeah, being able to do that, like Stephen King talks about that a lot in On Writing, about just working on whatever he's working on and then just putting it away in a drawer and being able to come back to it later. Let's see here. Amar says 2001 Maniacs, I look at as a Freaks-inspired movie that he did. I have heard of 2001 Maniacs. I've heard of it, but I can't remember when. I don't know. How old is that movie? I mean, is 2001... I thought that 2001 Maniacs, is that the number of the Maniacs, or is that the year that the movie came out and it's called Maniacs? Because I have heard of a movie... I thought I was thinking of a movie called 10,000 Maniacs, or that might just be the band. I am not sure. But yeah, if there was a movie that came out in 2001 called Maniacs, then it's not necessarily the one that I'm thinking of. But this hand right here in the middle is like a great compositional bullseye. Right now, what I'm really trying to do is just divide areas. So this is really more of a proportion study at the moment. But the way that this hat breaks the arches is beautiful. The way that her dress, her kind of sunbathing dress kind of falls off of the shoulder, makes an elegant line. Something that I have to remind myself, and I reminded myself when I did the Hitchcock study above, was just to remember to squint as I go. Let's see here. Okay. Here we go. So James says 2001 Maniacs is also remake. And he said 2000 Maniacs is the original and the remake came out in 2005. And he also said She Freaks is another version of Freaks. Wow, I didn't know there were that many Freak movies. Did any of you guys see Nightmare Alley, by the way? Because I have not seen the original, and that's probably one that I should do film studies from. But the Guillermo del Toro one, it was, I mean, hey, the man is fantastic. In fact, to be honest, I should be doing film studies from Guillermo del Toro. He's one I should definitely put on the list. Even though I wanted to do black and white, there's a lot of beautiful shots in The Shape of Water that I should probably study from. And I mean, in Pan's Labyrinth, well, I mean, hell, you get started on someone like Guillermo del Toro, there's beautiful shots in every single movie that he does. So I could just go on and on about that. But I need to make a little mental note to pull some stills of that to work on. Let's see here. And Amar says it came out in 2005, but you think they got inspiration from Nightmare on Elm Street, in which the character and supposes mom was assaulted by 2001 maniacs. That's very possible. I've heard that people get banned for using the R word just because it's like a hot thing. So I edited your comment there, Amar. I don't know if that's true, but I don't want to take any chances. HJ is back and says, this is looking great. Thank you. Thank you. I mean, it's still early on. And, also, I'll mention, I mean, the whole point of doing film studies is that someone else already made a great piece of art. And what I'm doing is I'm trying to learn from their greatness. So it's one of those things where maybe it's that I'm really bad at taking compliments. But when someone says something nice about a film study, I'm like, well, the compliments are all courtesy of Billy Wilder and his cinematographer. I deserve no credit from this other than recognizing that it is a brilliant piece of work that I should study. That's the only real thing that I should take any credit for whatsoever. Let's see here. I see Paul in the chat. Paul Pate, great cartoonist, comic artist, creator. Great to see you, man. Thanks for dropping in. James says Del Toro is making a Frankenstein movie. Now that is some interesting stuff. I mean, to be honest, if they just gave Guillermo del Toro the Universal monsters, like he would even have to direct them all. He could just like produce them. Pick other directors that he really likes and trusts and has like, oh man, what he could do with the Universal Monsters like franchise, that would be amazing. Let's see here. Amar says Sin City and Watchmen is another good one for film study. Yeah. I mean, Robert Rodriguez definitely. I mean, part of it is that both being from comics, they there's a lot of visual development that's already been done for Sin City. I mean, Sin City was a very, very unique film, more so than Watchmen, because Watchmen is very much a Zack Snyder film adapting something that Alan Moore intentionally designed to make it like, he said that it was designed so that it would, not that it was going to be unfilmable, but he really wanted to make something that was going to, it was designed for the comics medium, for that format. And to put it into other formats is not necessarily to diminish it, but there's just stuff you can do in comics. He was trying to make it so that it's something you could only do using the storytelling techniques of comics. And even, to Zack Snyder's credit, when he was making Watchmen, it's not like he said, I'm going to make something that's as good as the comic. He was saying the studios have decided they're going to make it, and no matter what, it's not going to live up to the comic. But if they're going to make it anyway, I want to at least be the person who took the shot at it. So I get that. Whereas Robert Rodriguez co-directed with Frank Miller and was, they intentionally were working to get as much of what's in the comic on screen as possible. Right. So I will tell you that as I'm doing this, I'm getting too caught up in line work. And what I really need to do is what I did in the film study that's above this, which is block in major shapes and then refine them. And, I am somebody who spends a lot of time working mostly in line as opposed to shape. And this is something, I feel like another thing that just the act of doing these film studies will help me break out of that whole constantly drawing everything in line. Like, I think my line work is pretty strong, but in fact, it may be too strong in that it's maybe overwhelming a lot of my pieces, and learning to really just look at shape. As a compositional tool would benefit me. Now, something I'm doing that obviously you guys can't really see is that I am giving a lot of the squint test. I'm trying to, as I look at this, force my eyes to just look at the simple large values. And really, this is probably what I should have started with, was after I did that sort of compositional block in, right from there, I should have switched to blocking in all of the shadows, all of the blacks. And I'm almost working in kind of a grid-like method. You know what? I mean, and when you look at this, the way that so many parts of the shape of the hat disappear into the shadow when you squint. The hat band goes right into the blackness of those arches. When you squint, the black top that she's wearing kind of disappears into the arches up around the corner of her shoulder and where her wrist, that you can see the separation in values between the arch is slightly lighter than the sleeve of her hand that's raised. But at the same time, if you compare it to the values around it, and if you squint, it really just disappears into there. So hang on, I have to mute for a second because I have to blow my nose. I've got a little bit of an allergy attack that's going on again. It's that season creeping up, y'all. All right. Let's go back here to the comments. So James says, I was doing film studies for LA Confidential in college. Seems I should revisit that one. I also did them for a Zulu war movie. It seems that war movies would be another good option for film studies. You know what? I think that any genre, and honestly, when it comes to studying color, I'm probably going to look at a lot of modern contemporary films and just films that use color in really interesting ways. But I don't think that there's any one genre or one era of film that is better than other for doing film studies, because depending on what you want to learn, any era of film can have great composition. I think that modern films also have great studies of value, but I think I'm trying to focus more on black and white films just because. Although I will tell you, the challenge is that there weren't as many black lead characters in black and white film. And I do want to do, black characters. I tried to find I should mention the website I'm using is called Film Grab, which just has film stills. It's film-grab.com. But they just have catalogs of stills from hundreds of movies. It's a great resource. I looked up Romero. I was trying to find Night of the Living Dead, and I couldn't find it on there. Although I just realized now I was looking up John Carpenter instead of George Romero. So that would probably explain why. I'll have to go back and take another look. But yeah. point being is that I'm looking at a lot of black and white films right now. And again, these are movies that, if anything, they remind me, oh, I need to go see that movie. Paths of Glory, one of Kubrick's first, if not his very first film. That's a black and white film that I need to see. Amar mentions Dark City. Yeah, that's a great film. I have that one on DVD. And they probably have a bunch of Alex Proyas films too. You know, I mean, Dark City and The Crow are still two of his masterpieces. Let's see here. James says, my concern is to do movie adaptations. My concern is, do the movie adaptations get people to read the comics? I get that not everyone is into comics, but Watchmen is studied in college for a reason. That is a good question, and I will tell you, I think the answer is a resounding no. For instance, if you take it out of comics in general, a large, not all, but a large number of the movies and TV shows that we watch are adaptations of novels. So forget about comics, but just books in general. You know, I think a lot of people don't enjoy reading. By and large, I think most people, it sucks to say most Americans, but I think that it's true for a lot of people all over the world, would much rather watch entertainment passively than read a book. And when we say that, it's not like, oh, the comics aren't moving the needle. It's that all comics suffer from it as well. But when a movie comes out, you will see a spike in sales of the book. But that spike would still only be, it depends on how popular the book is. For instance, The Witcher is wildly popular, but I mean, my understanding is that the games are what made the popularity of the books is what made them develop the games. The games are what made them develop the TV show. And that's another one. I still have not started watching The Witcher yet. There's a lot. You guys know how it is. When you're trying to make stuff, you end up never having any time to enjoy consuming stuff. But The Witcher is on my list. It is something I want to check out. And I like Liam Hemsworth. So the fact that you're only going to get a couple of seasons of Henry Cavill honestly doesn't bother me. I mean, it bothers me in the sense that it's a bummer that they're not making more with him. But I'm willing to both start it knowing that we're going to lose him, knowing that I'm only going to get a couple seasons of Henry Cavill, and also knowing that, hey, it's going to be a little bit different when they do the later seasons. My point being is that most people, I think, it's not just comics. I'm really rambling because I think you guys can tell the difference when I'm just talking and I'm making good points while I'm drawing, but that's usually when I'm pulling stuff out of my head. But this is a highly analytical process, and the difficulty of making coherent thoughts while I'm doing a film study, this is a lot more challenging than me just doing character designs. So you guys are gonna have to excuse the fact that I'm way more rambly than I normally am. No, I don't think that a popular movie or TV adaptation of a comic spikes the readership. I think that more people may pick it up, but I don't think it's a huge spike. But I also would say that while people do pick up prose novels, if it's an adaptation, that problem still exists. And I would still say that they probably don't pick it up in as huge of numbers as the authors would like. I mean, I think that anytime there's a Stephen King, like for instance, I'm sure that there was a spike in book sales of It when Stephen King's It came out. But it's not like Stephen King needed the boost. It was a bestseller for a very, very long time before they even made the TV movie back in the 90s. Which even that scared the crap out of me. I think it just comes down to the fact that I think, don't encourage reading enough as a species, as a culture. But it's not like a film adaptation owes the source material readers. And I think that's the big problem. The reason why those books maybe didn't have the readership it had before is simply because, a lot of people just don't look at reading as a pleasurable pastime. They look at it as schoolwork or homework. They just don't want to do it. So, when you do a film adaptation of something, it breaks open a new audience. All of a sudden it's, maybe some people who haven't cracked a book in a long time may pick it up, but more often than not, it really is just, it moves more copies. But I am not an expert in this field. I mean, there could very well be some people who are like, no, it absolutely makes a huge difference. Let's see here. HJ says, when I start film studies in September, the movies I'm most looking forward to are Inception, Joker, Get Out, Shaun of the Dead. He says, we do tons. Pretty sure we study the Raid as well, which is awesome. Well, that's interesting. Because I remember with the class I took, we didn't get to pick what movies we were going to study. We were given a syllabus, and I think we were encouraged to discuss or write papers on other things outside of class. But we probably had we had 2 movies a week that we had to watch together in class. And then we had to write, I think, an essay a week on one of the 2. So we were writing essays all semester. It was very writing intensive, and we had additional readings we had to do. One of which is responsible for making me a fan of David Cronenberg. We had to do readings on a film book called Cronenberg on Cronenberg, which there's a series that's just director, like Spielberg on Spielberg, Tim Burton on Tim Burton. It's just a series of essays written by filmmakers about their work. But I remember reading the Cronenberg on Cronenberg book, and the writing of the book was so good. Like, I had seen The Fly, but and I had seen Videodrome, but that book, his writing was so fantastic, it made me a fan of David Cronenberg's writing. And we watched Dead Ringers in the class, and I think we'd watched one other Cronenberg film. This was before History of Violence came out, but it definitely made me much more of a fan of Cronenberg. Now I'm starting to try and figure out where I want to start adding white into this. Let's see here. HJ mentions, I'm pretty sure The Raid has a comic book adaptation. That's cool. That's worth checking out. And James says, I love Film Grab. I have used it for teaching. That's a great resource. Definitely. Something to pass on to your students. So what do you teach? Do you teach composition? Teach art? James also says, I understand having a hard time getting into a comic when you begin in the middle of a story arc. Well, it's funny because I think about that, but I also think about the fact that almost every comic book that I read growing up in the 90s, you were always starting in the middle of some story. So, and I remember that there was a thing that a lot of people kind of chafed at, but Jim Shooter and I think Roy Thomas, old Marvel editors, also were very adamant that someone should be able to pick up a comic and not be lost in the story, which is where you get all those little editorial notes and commentary saying, you know, this is referring to this issue or this thing that happened in this other book, so that even if but the story as a whole should work even if somebody had not read what was coming before it. And I definitely got the sense when I first got into reading comics that I didn't really have a problem picking up stories in the middle. And even now, like my wife will be watching a TV show, and if I decide I want to jump in, I'm like, no, I'll figure it out. And just, you know, I may ask questions about who is this and who is that. But generally speaking, I just sort of just run with it. I love this butler back here in white. And what's interesting is when I squint, I really considered like just leaving the butler in gray because he's so far back. Like this butler back here, when you compare him to the white of her skin or her towel, he's definitely darker. But if you squint at this image, he still reads as, even though he's in the shadows, this is an interesting thing. This is where value studies teach you stuff, because I have to kind of decide, do I want to treat him as an object in shadow, meaning leaving him in gray, or do I want to treat him as he reads as something that is, the coat is white, because his face is definitely like dark gray. Like his face almost disappears into the shadow. But in looking at this, his shirt reads, his coat reads to me as bright, even though he's not in the sun. You know what? But that's the thing. The minute I put white on him, that little dab right there, I did that kind of as a test to see whether I should, you know, make him white, but he leaps out. It immediately makes it feel like he is standing in sunlight, whereas everything is in shadow, and what's in light is her shoulder. The towel that's up here. I will tell you that I'm having enough fun doing this that I might be doing film studies for the next week or two. Because now that I'm doing this, I'm like, oh man, this is really fun. It's hard. It is like mentally taxing. But this is kind of like, you know, even though I'm live streaming on Twitch as well, I'm not gaming, but doing a film study live is like me playing a video game live that is really hard and letting people watch me get my ass kicked. That's kind of what this feels like. And I can tell you, I've looked. Now, if I look at where this center pillar is, and I look at where it lines up with her shoe, her other foot is over too far. So I need to move both feet over so that this tip needs to be on this side of the pillar, and then this tip, that shoe needs to be way over there. So this is another thing where you're using the environment to help you measure. And really, honestly, part of that is just doing foreshortening with just flat planes of color is tough. Let's see here. Amar says, ironically, I do not like reading as well, but I do write, so go figure. Well, you know, Stephen King, I'll tell you one book that I think you should read is Stephen King's On Writing. But Stephen King does say if you want to be a writer, you have to do two things. You need to read and you need to write. One thing I would mention is that even if you don't like reading, it is very helpful to find books that are like what you want to write, because in order to understand what kind of response you want to elicit from readers and how you want them to react to your work, you need to experience that. Otherwise, you're just putting thoughts out there and you have no idea whether people are really responding to it in the way that you want. So to a certain degree, in order to be a good writer, I think it really is imperative to put yourself in to be a good writer. I think you need to put yourself in the reader's place, not necessarily reading your own work, but reading other people's work. So Paul says, do you think, how much of an impact do you think independent creators like you are having on the tapestry of fiction? The cost of entry to comics, film, literature is going down. Well, I think that there is an impact, but in terms of how strong that impact is, I feel like I don't have the distance and perspective to properly say, because we live in a world where, you know, you can have somebody like, I cannot remember her name, but the creator who did the Webtoons comic Lore Olympus. You know, I mean, I believe they're making an animated series out of Lore Olympus for Netflix. You know, she's got a best-selling book, you know, that, you know, started from a web comic. You've got the creator, the creator of the cartoon, the comic what is it? Nimona. They were already an established comic creator. They, I believe, did Nimona as a web comic. I think they were the same person who created Lumberjanes, but then they did Nimona. Now it's an animated film that's up for Oscar awards. But at the same time, one can't help but feel like it's an exception that proves the rule, which is just that most works of art or literature, doesn't matter whether it's music, painting, comics, film, what have you, most of it will just go out into the ether and have little to no impact. It'll just be out there. It was an expression of thoughts and ideas, and then it disappears. And that is unfortunate, but I think that that's true. I think that the potential to reach a large audience is larger than it's ever been before. But just because something has potential doesn't mean that it's going to achieve that potential. And I think that that's sort of the challenging place we live in, is that there's no way to know whether something is going to achieve acclaim. And even if it achieves acclaim, there's things that achieve financial success that sell well that may not necessarily be that good. And there's things that are very good that for reasons wholly out of anyone's control, even if it's good, it never necessarily finds an audience. And I think that is the challenge and the gamble of making art, is that there are no guarantees. And it may be that you may produce something and you spend years and you pour years of your life into it, spend most of your life in abject poverty, and then as an old man or woman or old person, you may find an audience, and all of a sudden it's a bestseller, and you're like, okay, I'm maybe a millionaire in like the last decade of my life, but was it worth it? And that's why I'm always focusing on the act, finding joy in the act of making. Because for me, the only reason to monetize art is so that I can afford to do it more frequently. That is the goal of making the money, is so that I can keep doing more of it. For me, what I'm doing right now is why I make art. Like literally this act of just studying the composition of somebody else's work just to try and learn how to compose images better is incredibly fascinating to me. This is, I would say, almost as fascinating as making my own comics, because there's times when this is just as hard as making my own comics. Just studying to get better is as hard as doing the thing itself. And I always tell people, because there's no guarantees, I don't say that to discourage people from entering a creative field. I tell them that if the only reason to do it is to make money, there's better ways to make money. Because this doesn't have the guarantees. Now, in terms of having an impact on the tapestry of fiction, that's not for any one living person to judge. That is for history to judge. History decides what are the pieces that are worth visiting and revisiting. I mean, you've got to remember that Norman Rockwell at one point went from being incredibly lauded and being being America's illustrator to being considered a hack. Same with Leyendecker. Same with Bouguereau. I don't know how many people know Adolfo Bouguereau, but he's an artist who, for my money, he combines the storytelling of Norman Rockwell with the master draftsmanship and technique of Da Vinci and Michelangelo. Like, just an amazing, looks as good as any of the Renaissance painters. But he was somebody who kind of, not even during modernism, but almost like sort of like as the beginning of the rise of modernism. I'm trying to remember whether he was, I think he worked at the end of the 18th and beginning of at the end of the 19th and beginning of the 20th century. My timeline on his actual lifespan is very foggy. And it's a shame, because I have a great book on his work from an exhibition I went to. Point being is that he's somebody who was kind of considered a hack because he was too good. They were like, he was too slick. He was too polished, which in my mind, I'm like, you're penalizing somebody for being too good at what they do? That just, it seems nuts to me. But these are all things that he went through a period. The reason why I'm telling you this is because it ties in the sense that he went through a period of great acclaim. He went through a period of decline, and now he's having a resurgence. And I think that the not being able to predict how someone's career is going to go in that sense relates directly to what you're saying about the tapestry of fiction, Paul. In that once we release the work to the world, it's not up to us to decide how the world is going to interpret or take that work. And I think that can end up leading to a very disappointing results for some creators. But hang on, I got to blow my nose again. Yeah. What does and doesn't affect the tapestry of fiction? We live in a very, very strange time right now. Media is changing and warping in very strange ways. You've got these algorithms deciding what people do and don't see. You've got people overwhelmed with information and media and shows and books and video games. And I guess I do agree that we have more opportunity to affect the tapestry of fiction. But whether we're actually genuinely affecting it, whether we're changing the culture, specifically comics, I will tell you that independent authors, like prose authors, I think are really reaching out, and I think they are, I listen to a lot of podcasts about book marketing. And I say that independent authors are working really hard to reach people that may not necessarily be readers. And I think that to say one way or the other definitively how that's changing the culture, I kind of got to say a maybe. I don't think that it's something that I can definitively say, because all of these things, like for every success story, there's hundreds of stories of someone who tried and failed, and books that never necessarily found an audience. And I'm sure that for a lot of those, you can find stories of books, you're like, yeah, I can see why this never caught on, because this just isn't very good. But I think that there's also going to be stories of things that really should have found an audience and never did. And whether it's because of too noisy a media landscape, too crowded a landscape, because if you have a landscape that's crowded with millions of books, if 90% of them are genius, instead of because most people say 90% of everything is going to be crap. But if 90% of the works of art that are out there are actually genius works, we still don't have time to watch all of those. By the way, something I forgot to say at the top of the show. I had a Post-it on my desk. I wanted to give a shout out to AfroBoy97, new Patreon subscriber. I had a note right by my desk to say at the top of the stream, give him a shout out, welcome him to the channel, welcome him as a subscriber. And I realized now, I looked over at that, I'm like, I didn't say that at the top of the show. I meant to give him his shout out, give him his props and his love. I apologize for that. AfroBoy, I appreciate you. Thank you. Want to make sure that I get that. I meant to do that at the start of the show, but I'm doing it now. All right. I need to stop drawing and just get back to the comments, because I've been talking for a long time, because I'm trying to focus on drawing this thing while I'm talking. So the movies that HJ was telling us about, they studying in class, he says, these are the movies on the syllabus. He says, I'm very lucky. Hell yeah, you are. That's an awesome ass film class. James says The Dead Zone stands out among Cronenberg's films in that it's not body horror. Yeah, that's another one. And I saw that when I was way too young. I was probably like 8 when I saw The Dead Zone. And it was very, very disturbing. I don't think I've ever read the book, which is weird. I'm a Stephen King fan, but that's one of the few books I don't think I've actually ever read. But I did see the movie when it came out. I mean, hell, I'd like to see Cronenberg adapt more Stephen King stories, because I think his aesthetic, because Cronenberg has gotten more sensitive, I think, and more emotionally. He's plumbed the depths of sort of emotional horror, existential horror, as his films have gone on. Like, to be honest, one of my favorite films of Cronenberg isn't a horror film at all. A Dangerous Method, that film about Freud and Carl Jung and their friendship and eventual falling out. That, to me, that's probably my favorite Cronenberg film. I mean, he's done a lot of great films, like Existenz, a bunch of other films. I have not seen any of Cronenberg's son's films. James says, I've seen Possessor, but I've heard good things about Antiviral. I've watched the trailer for, I think he's got 3 films out now, but for Cronenberg's son, I've watched Brandon Cronenberg. I've watched the trailers for 3 of his films. All of them look awesome. I have not made time for any of them. Did he direct Infinity Pool? I'm trying to think, because Infinity Pool is one I saw the trailer for, and my wife was interested in it. She likes Alexander Skarsgård from True Blood, so I can kind of get away. Anything with him in it, I'm probably going to be able to get her to watch. So that's one that's possibly on the list. James says, I was teaching digital arts classes for a while. Some studies were some students were having issues with their compositions and camera positions, so I was using Film Grab to point some things out. Wild at Heart and Blowout were some examples I used. I have not seen either of those in years. In fact, Blowout, I think, was one of the ones that we watched. Well, actually, you know what? That might be Blow Up. Whichever. I think Blowout was the Travolta, and Blow Up was Michael Antonioni. I'm gonna try to talk like I'm a deep film nerd here. I'm not. But I think Antonioni film is the one that I saw in class, not the Travolta one. Let's see here. But he says mainly 3D modeling classes. What with the camera? So let's see here. Amar says the water and the reflecting light, and also the edges of her throw wrap. I don't see any water reflection here in the film study. I mean, unless you're talking about the reflections in the glass that's on the table. Which that was such a small detail. I hadn't even gotten to framing that out. Like as it is, I mean, I drew all the arches before putting the actual butler in there, and that's really how I was like, I should have started with just blocking the arches and then kind of building all the pieces around there. This is what's good for doing film studies, is forcing myself to start with just simply getting a framing of the large masses of blacks and then kind of working in from there. So HJ says comics are definitely one of the easier mediums to drop into halfway through a storyline, in my opinion. No 10 hours of content to catch up on. Well, you know what? It depends on what book you look at, because some people are really hesitant to jump into something like a Spider-Man or a Superman or a Daredevil when they've got hundreds of issues of continuity, and people are just like, how am I jumping into like an issue that's like chapter 6 of a 12-part story, and people are thrown by that. I think that it's also, it depends on the writer, because for instance, I acknowledge that I do not write good standalone issues. I published Morningstar in 8 individual issues, but I wrote it as a graphic novel. And the only reason why I published it in issues is because if I had stuck with the graphic novel format, it would have taken me 7 or 8 years to put the entire series out, to put out the complete book. So this way I could put out an issue a year, 1 to 2 issues a year, and still get it out on a regular basis. But I think some writers are very good at writing a single issue that is part of a whole, but you still feel like you get a good chapter, a complete chapter as you read it. One of the things I'll say was a great example was I recently read Tom King and Greg Smallwood's The Human Target, and it is a phenomenal book. It's a beautiful comic. I think I may have already mentioned it on another live stream, but it was really, really well drawn, well written, beautiful storytelling. And I think it's one of those that builds on each chapter, but still each chunk is satisfying. And I think that is a difficult thing to do. I myself say I don't think that I do it well. I also haven't written enough work to really judge yet. What I need to do is put out like another 50 to 100 issues of comics before I can properly judge. That's really at the point where I'm realizing, in order to really get good at this, I need to start looking in like measuring in chunks of like 10s and 20s of issues to look at how things evaluate, as opposed to just, a couple of graphic novels. So HJ says, as a kid, I'd read comics with my dad instead of bedtime stories. And I never really had a problem dropping in, though that is probably because I was so in awe of the medium and the art and the stories. Well, I think that that's an interesting thing in that because of the visual element of comics, even when you don't understand what's going on, you're entertained. And I think that's an advantage that comics have. And I think when you look at television, you can come into a story, and if there's a lot of action, you don't necessarily question what's going on in the larger epic. Like, you can jump into the middle of the X-Files. The X-Files is a very good example of something that has a lot of continuity, but at the same time, always has something interesting going on in the foreground, and also does really good standalone stories. That's an excellent example. Another thing that I have not rewatched in a long time is also from Chris Carter. Millennium was one of my favorite shows of all time, and I have not gone back and rewatched it. And maybe I shouldn't, because I may go back and rewatch it and be like, oh, wow, I'm not as in love with this as I thought. But I think I probably will be. In fact, now I really kind of want to rewatch it. Right now, my wife and I are watching Fall House of Usher, and we're really enjoying that. And it does tell satisfying Edgar Allan Poe inspired stories that are horrific, but really they're all stories about greed. It's a really, really good TV series. I'm enjoying that right now. Amar says, that's crazy how many content creators have created content within the last 20 years that have been greenlit for animated films in under 10 years, with some within 5 to 7 years. That's the thing. A lot of stuff comes out, and some stuff, you have to make the thing first. And you can make it with an eye towards getting it developed into other media. But if you don't make the thing and you don't make it well, then it doesn't matter. Then you've just got something you poured 3 to 5 years into that no one wants to option. Or people might option it, it never goes anywhere. I don't want to say... I guess what I'm trying to say is that I feel like the conversation about changing the culture, the act of making the thing is so hard that if you focus too much on what's going to happen after you make it, then it'll get in the way of the actual process of getting the thing done. You have to make something that people want to engage with, and how much they engage with it can be a signpost of how likely it is to succeed in other media. So I'm not saying you shouldn't pursue other media. Definitely developing stuff as video. I would love to see Morningstar as a video game, or a movie or a TV series. But if you don't make the first thing good, then it's not going to go anywhere. And it takes all of my conscious energy just to focus on that first part. So Martin's in the chat. Hey, Martin, good to see you. Thanks for popping in. I think at this point, I'm just going to try and catch up on all of the comments, because I don't know if I'm going to have time to draw any more before we're at the end of the stream. So the Ink Slicer says, that is such a beautiful contrast to the general public and companies wanting to commercialize art and run it like a cheap product on a conveyor belt. Here's the thing. I'm of two minds about what you just said there, Ink Slicer, because, and by the way, welcome to the channel. Thanks for dropping in and for the thoughtful comment. It is called a film. It's called the film business. And in comics, it's the comics industry. It is a business. We're making things. We are making product. The problem is that it is a product that requires a piece of our soul. That is the challenge. That art does not necessarily want to be a product. Art wants to simply be a transmission of emotion and thoughts and ideas. That's what art wants to be. But in order to do that, we need to finance our existence. And it is sometimes it feels like it shouldn't be that hard to reconcile it. Make something, share it, profit from it, make more. That's as complicated as it should be. But the problem is that the business aspect often requires treating things as a widget, just getting stuff done because it needs to be done by deadline, and if that means the quality suffers a little bit here, then maybe it doesn't. And there are times when things have been crammed out and that speed, just like in film, having to jam on something or being limited by resources may have caused people to come up with innovative solutions that people love. By the same token, you also have things that are masterpieces and they take longer. And I think I mentioned this last week's live stream. No one remembers how late Watchmen was or how far behind schedule. It's that other Frank Miller book, Hard Boiled. No one remembers how late that is. All people remember is that it's a goddamn masterpiece. So to say I think that you can make an argument for and against the commoditization of art. And it really comes down to the individual, the work of art that they're making, and the circumstances under which they're making it. Because either one can be right. I know for me, I prefer trying to make something as good as possible. And then I want every artist, let me this way, if I could crank out brilliant work and crank it out on like a monthly or a bi-monthly-ish process, I would love to just shoot out work and still have the quality be really high. I don't have a problem with the idea of someone cranking work out. It's just the fact of, like you said, cranking it out like a cheap product on a conveyor belt. And I will say, I will retract. I will step back from that in that, for me, I enjoy the act of making more than some people say I hate writing, but I love having written. I actually love the act. I love being in the mix and doing it. So for me, if I spent the rest of my life and only published one novel, I'd much rather publish 10 novels than one novel. But if I get to work every day on a comic project, if that ends up being something that I'm doing less, but I'm still getting to do something creative every day, I'm more happy doing that than only working half the time but having twice as much workout, if that makes any sense. And Martin said he's sorry I'm late, and Paul said, Martin, let's not make it a habit. cut him some slack. People got crazy schedules. And James, thank you for confirming. James said, I had asked 15 minutes ago whether Brandon Cronenberg had directed Infinity Pool, and James says yes, he was directed by Brandon Cronenberg. I knew there was a reason why I had it on my watch list. So who knows? Maybe when we finish Fall of House of Usher, we'll watch that. So Amar says The Glass. Okay, so we're going back to the film study here. It says The Glass. I thought that was a water fountain. Yeah, it does look, it's shaped like a water fountain, but really she's got like a bottle of champagne, one glass that's half filled, and then another glass turned upside down on that little table there. But the way it is shaped, it could be shaped like a water fountain. I think that is also intentional in terms of the composition. God damn it, I need to watch some Billy Wilder films too. Paul says, I'm currently rewatching Moonlighting. Some of it is so bad. I'm loving rewatching it though. You know what's funny is in your comic, I got a little bit of that Moonlighting vibe when the investigator is like going around and meeting with that woman. They're going through all the craziness before the motocross race / battle. I got a very Moonlighting vibe in terms of the back and forth banter there in the positive, not the bad Moonlighting, the good Moonlighting, season 1 Moonlighting. And you know what? It's funny because for years you could not get Moonlighting on DVD or streaming because of all, I guess, the music rights. And I think they've had it available for the past few years, but I just had not made it a point. But it is something that I want to go back and watch now. See, and this goes back to what we've been talking about here. There is so much media. There's so much content out there. And it's not like, oh, there's so much garbage out there. There may be a lot of garbage out there. But even among that, I can easily pick 100 hours of television and movies that I have not seen that I want to see. I can easily pick 100 graphic novels that I have not read that I want to read. In my newsletter, one of the things I talk about is usually what I'm reading and what I'm watching. That's kind of like a big chunk of it. It's the section I call the media diet. But what I realized is I'm going to start a new section on what I wish I was watching. Because there's so many books that I want to read and want to watch. I just saw that my library has a copy of the most recent Ed Brubaker, Sean Phillips graphic novel, Where the Body Was. Generally, every time they have a new book out, I gobble it up. I love their work. And I've got like 2 other books that I'm reading right now that I'm gonna have to get to before I get to the Sean Phillips and Brubaker book. But I love their work as well. And it's just like, there is so much good stuff out there. And I look at that, I express that because it's real easy to look at how much good stuff there is out there and say, all right, well, there's too much work. I'm never going to be able to succeed. I can't compete with these people who are already more established and better than I am. Why bother? And to that, I say, I bother because I am called to the act of creating. I am called to it. I wake up and I think about telling stories. I wake up and I have a burning itch to draw and write. And the business side, like we've brought up before about there being more opportunity to capitalize on either getting your work in front of a larger audience or getting your work adapted in other media. Those other opportunities can make it possible to have a sustainable career doing art. I haven't hit that yet. My day job, I'm lucky. I have a creative day job, so I get to do creative work, but I'm not making a living from my comics by a damn sight. I do it because I can't not do it. And, I think that is sort of the road that we have to navigate, is continuing to push forward. And I think if you're creating simply to make money, in the end, this is so hard. You have to want more than just the money, because there's easier ways to make money. Go be a lawyer, go be a banker. And I'm not saying that like get out of art. I'm just saying that to do it well enough to make money after it, you have to pour a certain amount of your soul into it. So let's see. All right. End of that rant. We may be wrapping up here, but if I may get into another mini rant on the way out, but otherwise I think we're winding down. And Amar says, well, it is a champagne holder metal thing. He says, I can see it now when you're zoomed in. Yeah, I mean, that's the funny thing. When I'm generally speaking, when I'm working, a lot of times I will zoom not just full screen, but I will zoom out like tiny postage stamp thing, because then that really allows me to see the broad shapes. I mean, even this, the way that I'm looking at this right now probably looks tiny to you guys. If you guys are watching it on a phone, then it's just like a little bitty square in the middle. But when you zoom out this far, this lets me see the values. This really, I can look at this and go, oh, that's it. It's real simple. Let's see here. Paul says, are you on Letterboxd? You'd like it? I have heard of Letterboxd, but I have not checked it out. Let me write that down. I have heard of it. I just haven't logged on. And Paul says, wow, thank you. You deserve it. You're doing great work. You definitely deserve all of the compliments and accolades. I mean, every time I open Instagram, that's usually where I'm reading your comics. And every time I go in there, there's usually whatever your most recent post is. And they always make me smile or chuckle, or there's something dark and heavy. I'm like, wow, that is some gritty. And that's the thing I like, is that it is playfully gritty. That's the best way to describe your work. At least it's the best way I can describe it. So for those of you who have not checked out Paul Pate's comics, please do go check him out on IG. Follow him on whatever platforms he may be on. Definitely go check Paul's stuff out. It's great comics. Ink Slicer says, my previous comment comes from the recent rise in AI art and the fear that companies would replace artists as a trade-off to have something instant, trying to eliminate the joy of the process. Well, you cannot stop corporations from doing that. Regardless of whether we think it's a bad idea, whether it's let me put it this way. I think that probably most of the people who are creative tend to want to keep creativity in the hands of humans versus machines. I think the people that simply want to create a product, just a widget, are the people who are probably in favor of let's use AI for as much as possible and cut our costs. I think that if you don't have people who actually have taste and know how to shape a creative work, you may have a flood of work that no one is interested in. And I think that people who are continuing to make things, and I'm not saying that you can't necessarily have AI assist an artist. Like I've heard of a lot of people using AI to create reference and then making work from that. I don't really have much AI I don't have AI in my workflow, but it's more of one of those things where I want to see how it shakes out. And if there's a way separate from the ethics of training models on the works of other artists. Like for instance, I honestly, if everything was trained on work that was in public domain, I probably wouldn't necessarily even have a problem with AI. You know, it's the fact that it's being trained on concept artists that are currently actively working, and they're trying to mimic the styles of people who are currently, making their living as an art and taking jobs away from them. That's the thing I have a problem with. But something that's trained on the old masters, I'm like, sure, go ahead, whatever. I think in the end, what's going to happen is a bunch of people are going to use AI to create a lot of art, a lot of content. There's going to be a flood. And I think that only a small percentage of it is going to connect with an audience. And I think that once people see that, there's going to be two things that are going to happen. One is that when people see that just because they can make something quickly, it doesn't mean they can necessarily monetize it. They're going to say, well, why am I wasting my time doing this anyway? Because even if it was instantaneous, they just have their, if you spend, if you're just cranking out prompt after prompt after prompt, yes, you can do it quickly. But if none of it leads to actual making something of value, then they're going to probably be like, all right, maybe there's something missing here. And that thing that's missing is the human element. And then two, you're going to see people who continue to create great work, and they're doing it in spite of all this technology being in the way. And it's going to connect with people and resonate with people with that human authenticity. Now, the third thing is that there are going to be some works, whether in film, TV, or comics, that are AI generated that are going to hit. But I think that in the same way that, there's a minimal number of stories of indie creators, like when an indie creator does do something and makes a big splash financially or economically and they succeed, that's the exception to the rule. I think that in the same way, you're going to see that while there are going to be some people that may do some really innovative, financially successful AI projects, you're also going to see a lot of people that spent hours and hours writing prompts and engineering prompts, and it didn't necessarily lead anywhere. Now, I think that if someone enjoys making stuff with AI, they can. Like somebody told me, I saw an article the other day, a post where someone was saying that an artist was really angry that they were not getting credit for writing prompts for an AI piece that was being used in an article. And my whole thing was, well, you're making artwork, but not necessarily getting credit for it. I'm like, well, you wanted to know what it feels like to be an artist. Sometimes we create stuff and then other people appropriate it. And that's kind of that's the irony of that, is someone appropriating his work and him feeling like he was getting credit for it. That's kind of the thing that the people who are having their work trained on models, that's their big problem. It's like they have the same problem. So welcome to being an artist. See here. Amar says, well, AI will not be them blame, because it is no different than any other change that happened in the creative field over the past 100 years. Every time there's a change in how things can be done, people get all doom and gloom because there are tons of ways to make art tradition. There are tons of ways to make art traditionally, but most start out going that route. I'm sorry, it's hard for me to read this one. Let me just move through. Wow, there are so many more comments here. All right. Let's see here. Amar says, AI is just another tool. And it's just another tool, and AI has been around like 50 years. It's just available to the consumer now. I can pick every period from the 70s to now where people have had some the same notion. And Celeste says, that's fair, Amar. And Amar says, when you do art, you do it first for yourself, then the result of other people enjoying it is the added benefit. It says, we'll all hope for the best when we create art, but none of us have the time or money to spend our entire lives creating and never get the fanfare you wish to. And Martin asks, Paul, what's your IG? James says, putting your soul into it. I remember a student from sculpting class saying he had no soul, but didn't know how to. But I didn't know how to respond to that. Well, I mean, my response would be like, all right, if you have no soul, then put the void into the work. There's something there. That lack of a soul unto itself is like a negative shape. It's a negative space. Amar says, AI can be used to help you beta test your ideas. So you can use AI to train it on your own style as well. And Amar says, especially what Google is doing with Sora AI. I mean, my whole thing is simply, if people really want to create art with machines instead of their hands, it's not my place to stop them. I think that the ethical things about the training models are valid. But beyond that, if someone wants to do that instead of drawing, I don't care. I don't care what other people want to do. And if people would rather read books and watch films made by machines instead of humans, I can't change other people's hearts and souls. They need to just, if that's what people want, then maybe I only make art for an audience of one, and it's just me. Maybe that's just the world I'm going to live in. HJ says, I've heard of people using AI to research getting information for works as opposed to searching on Google, which I think is probably fine. I will tell you that I do use AI to generate hashtags when I post art on social media. That is what I use AI for, because I don't feel like doing the research to find out what social tag would be best used for what particular artwork. So I just will say, give me a bunch of hashtags for an artwork, for a piece of artwork about this, and I'll have the subject matter and the media that it's made in and the genre. And that's it. Because I feel like that to me is research work. It's not creative work. And that's what I feel like AI is useful for, is research work. Amar says, I see it as a win-win for the indie artist. James says, you can tell when passion is put into a piece. And it's interesting because there's artists I follow on DeviantArt, and I see more and more, they have like the little unicorn icon on DeviantArt when something is AI generated. There's, people that are posting works on there, and they look amazing. I can't. I look at it, I'm like, I can't say that it's argued that it is a bad piece of artwork. I mean, I'm just like, if that's what people want, that's what people want. I think that what we really need to do is deal with the ethics of training on artists who didn't consent to being trained and getting those artists compensated. To me, that is the larger issue. The issue of whether industries are just going to, studios are just going to fire everyone and do everything with machines. I think that the artists that still have a desire to create will find a way. I think that we may need to go through an apocalypse of creativity where the world's just filled with beautiful looking things that have no meaning. I think that we're probably going to have to go through a period of that. Kind of like how when I was talking about Bouguereau, Adolfo Bouguereau, and how people were criticizing him for being too polished and too slick. I think we may have to go through a period where it's too AI, because AI makes these perfectly looking, beautiful renderings. They are beautiful. I can't tell you they're not beautiful. I'll go in and I'll look and I'll just see it. I'm like, wow, that's a beautiful looking image. I can tell that it's AI because it has a photographic quality to it. And it has a certain machined, I mean, it's just one of the things where it feels beautiful, but it feels, you can still kind of see how it is a mishmash of amazing concept art. Like they've just looked at all of the best concept art ever done and just kind of mashed them together with the right proportions and the right colors. Maybe that's what we need, is we need to go through a period of that. Amar says, AI is better at resourcing and cataloging than I am because it can do it a lot faster. AI has been used and not mentioned by the public for many years. James says, sometimes you got to make things with a grain of salt. Plus, you can't make everyone happy. Very, very true. Paul says, Amar, right? Oh, let me see here. Oh, I missed that. Amar says, that's what Paul was agreeing to. Amar says, that's insane that he or she wants credit for a prompt. It's like people making a career off fan art. That's what Paul was saying, right? Yes, completely agree. So many comments. Yeah, I'm not going to draw anymore. I'm just going to get caught up through the comments, and we're going to wrap up the stream because there's still quite a bit that I'm trying to catch up through here. Ink Slicer says, I've seen great strides in animation using tech to help cover tedious parts of the animation, like recoloring multiple frames. Well, I read that an article about the new release of Sora AI. I know that was mentioned earlier in the comments. And they had probably 20 different examples. And out of those, I like 4 or 5 of them were CG animation. And they were phenomenal. They looked great. They looked beautiful. I mean, some of them were also deep fake, and that was kind of scary. But yeah, I think, in a world where an artist can sit there and thumbnail their story and then feed the thumbnails into AI and say, animate this, give me an animated film. When I say thumbnail, I actually meant to say storyboard. Getting loopy. Yeah, I think that it does put a lot of creativity in creative tools and creative power in the hand of the single individual. And I think that that's the strength, is that it is the multiplier of the independent creator. And I think that's, Amar and I have talked a lot about this. And the thing about it is, I know Amar is pro using those tools. For me, it's less of, I'm not interested in doing that as part of my workflow, but I don't object to their existence and other people using them for it. But the idea of having a tool that eliminates anything that you find tedious. I mean, in theory, I could feed it all of my artwork, my black and white artwork, and just say, give me this in 20 different color palettes. Just recolor my artwork. I could use AI just for that. I think that I would lose something by not learning on my own how to color my artwork better and better understand color theory. But I think that that's a place where, if I did it, I would be open about it. This is what I am using AI for. But you know what? Hell, maybe I should do that. Maybe I should take some of my own, not necessarily these film studies, but take some of my own sketches and just ask AI to color them for me and see what it looks like. I don't know. So I'm throwing Paul's socials up there so everyone can go and follow his artwork and his comics. So it's Paul Pate Comics and at Pate_Paul. So if you guys want to go read some gritty crime comics, definitely go follow Paul. Start reading his work. It's great stuff. You're not going to be disappointed. Definitely check Paul out. Let's see here. James says, I don't know. I think if you want to practice your anatomy, you shouldn't focus on clothes so much. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting, interesting thing. Yeah. Let's see here. Amar says people are going to rip people off personally and professionally, and corporations will be corporations. Well, my thought on that statement is that it is true, but just because it's true does not mean we should not fight against people ripping it off and trying to make it harder for people to rip off. Simply saying, well, they're going to do it, so what are you going to do? I reject that. If people are just going to go around and try and rob you, you're just going to stand in the corner and say, all right, well, I guess people mug people, so here, put my hands up. Oh, you stabbed me while you mugged me? People gonna stab. It's like, no, you hit somebody over the head with a baseball bat when they try to take your shit. So acknowledging the reality that corporations are going to try and take what they're going to take, and that people are going to swindle and cheat and scam people, including artists. Yes, we're acknowledging that truth. No one's denying that. But for you to deny that artists should not stand up for it and try to protect their property, I wholeheartedly reject that. I am 110% against that. And I don't know if that's how you meant for that statement to come off. So if you meant something else, by all means, correct me. But I completely reject that line of thinking. Amar says, funny enough, when we create art using computers, we're using machines as well. I mean, hell, I'm using a machine to live stream. I'm drawing on a machine instead of drawing with pen and ink. And hell, if I had a camera above my desk to live stream, even if I were working traditional media, I'd still be using machines in order to share that with you. So, and if I'm, every comic that I drew up till now, I drew on Bristol board with ink and then scanned those pages in and then colored them digitally. So yeah, I'm using machines when I'm making art. Amar says the only difference to it is the human hand. He says, if it was a digital human creating art, I wonder what people will say when they see that happening. Amar says, I differ on that point because passion is subjective. A person can spend a month on a hyper-realistic piece. Another person can do an abstract or surrealistic piece. How do you determine which has the most soul? It's all opinion-based and how the viewer interprets it. Like CG, Photoshop art, or any other digital sculpted art, it has a specific look to it. Said, I think the biggest issue for most artists is ego, wanting to prove themselves more than creating the content. If creating the content is important, then you have to find whatever tools will help you get to the end goal. All right. That has been a long tear. We've gone almost 2 hours here. I got to wrap this up. We have had a good, long, rousing conversation, and I always welcome it. And I think you made a lot of good points, Amar. But again, I think that it's one of those things where how everyone is going to use it, I guess, I said it already. I don't have time to worry about what other people are doing. I worry about someone trying to take my own work and protecting my own work and protecting the rights of creators. But in terms of worrying about what other people do or don't want to use AI, I'm like, if if that's what people really want, like, I look at it this way. If everybody in the world today just decided to start making art and comics, every single person on earth, and the world was just flooded with it, some stuff would do well and some stuff wouldn't. You know what? I don't think that people should be, stealing the intellectual property of other people. And I think that we do need to fight and rage against that. But on the whole, if an ethically trained AI model existed and everyone just said, I'm just going to start using it to write scripts for me and create art and optimize my workflow, I think that's because I will tell you that I know that, Amar, you said that passion is subjective, but I don't think that creativity, I don't think that the creative spirit can always be funneled into optimization. I think that the creative process is a living, breathing thing. And I think that's one of the things that reason why people rail against machines is because how and why things work, it's kind of like quantum mechanics. We know it exists, but we don't fully understand how and why. I think that creativity is very much the same way. So on that note, let's see, James gives the thumbs up. And HJ says, great stream once again, Jeremy. Thanks so much. I appreciate that. Thank you for stopping by. Everybody, make sure you hit that like button. If you know somebody else you think would enjoy these live streams, hit that share button. Amar says, laters, great day all, and thanks, Jeremy. And Amar says, I agree we need to fight, but you have to pick your battles because most artists don't own their art or their art style. Very true. And I'm glad we're going out on that note. So I appreciate that. Thank you so much, man. He says, which was based on someone else's IP or someone else's style as well. Yeah, I mean, all art is interrelated. Everybody no one learns in a vacuum, but it's that synthesis where you make something that's new. And I think that's the challenging thing there. All right, guys. So on that note, back to the big screen. In addition to our weekly live stream, so we're here every Sunday, 11 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. But in addition to that, twice a month, we do something called Art Book Study Group. We do it on Patreon, patreon.com/Jeremy. It's patreon.com/GERIMI. Twice a month, we sit down and we look at some of the best art books around. And we do deep dives into them, trying to suck out all the knowledge we can. And we've been doing a long-running series on Walt Reed's The Figure. And you can watch hundreds of hours of us sitting down, studying from these books, dissecting the lessons in there. So it's the process that I use for trying to improve my own craft. We do it twice a month. And in addition to becoming a Patreon subscriber, you can get access. It gives you access to our Patreon exclusive Discord server where we share our works in progress, art encouragement, art tools, shop talk, general recommendations, all sorts of stuff. So you can head on over there, check that out. There's links in the description for the video. You also get access to a digital archive where you can read my comic books online. If you would like to get a free digital sketchbook, work in progress animated gifts delivered right to your inbox, blog posts about what I'm reading, what I'm watching, what's inspiring me creatively. You can sign up for my free monthly newsletter at newsletter.jeremy.net. And if you'd like to read physical copies of my books, or if you read digitally on Kindle, you go to amazon.jeremy.net. You can pick up books like my first graphic novel, Eye of the Gods. It is a standalone psychological thriller about a man cursed with visions he cannot control. You can pick up my most recent project, Morning Star. It is a retelling of Lucifer's fall from heaven as a Western. So it's an 8-issue series. Volume 1 contains issues 1 through 4. Volume 2 has the conclusion, issues 5 through 8. Now, both volumes have extensive back matter, got character designs, thumbnails, page layouts, script excerpts, and more. This is going to show you how I put the entire book together. And if you want to check out what's inside of these books before you pick them up, go to the homepage of my YouTube channel. And there you will see book flip throughs. If you scroll down, you can see what's inside the books before picking them up. All right, guys. Again, it's been great. Obviously, a rowling conversation. We spent another 45 minutes just talking, even outside of the drawing. I think I'm probably going to continue with more film studies next week because I'm really enjoying this. And I feel like I just barely dipped my toe in. And I haven't done enough of these in a good long while. And I really need to get back to it. All right, guys. Thank you again for all the great comments, conversation, feedback. That's it for now. Go be creative.